What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast, coming to you live on a Thursday evening. We are officially 1 week removed from the 2023 NFL draft, and so we're full steam ahead towards the actual season. So excited to dive into some things today with my guy Tyler, as always. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
I can't believe it's only been a week since the first round of the draft. I don't know what happened. Also, for everyone listening, my allergies are killing me today. So we'll see how that goes. But I'll make it through. I'll survive. I'll do the flu pod or whatever you want to call it. And yeah, earlier this week, we interviewed the general manager of the Chargers.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Surprise. That was a surprise for us as well. We were working with the team on a different interview to be determined or to be revealed later, I should say. And then they emailed us back and were like, hey, that other interview is not possible yet. How about Tom Telesco? We were like, shit, why not?
Yeah, I know. So, I couldn't believe it. It felt like one of those scam emails where it's like, oh, hello, I'm a prince. You can send me, money and I'll send you millions of dollars or whatever. I never expected to get an email saying, hey, you want to interview Tom Telesco? Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, man, what a life right now. I got the email and it showed up on my watch and it was like, oh, the interview's not going to work this week. And I was like, oh man. And then I was like, wait, what does that second part say? Telesco? Excuse me? So it was a lot of fun, man. We got to interview Tom Telesco on Tuesday. So that'll be dropping next Tuesday, this upcoming Tuesday on the Chargers channel. So definitely stay tuned for that one. The feedback has been a ton of fun, on YouTube and everything for our first two shows on the Chargers channel. Obviously this past Tuesday, we did some superlatives of this 23 class for the Chargers. Had a great time breaking everything down in that regard. Just kind of diving into how things fit. Everybody does grades these days. Everybody, slaps an A- or whatever. We didn't feel like slapping a grade on each of these picks because frankly, there's probably only like two instant impact guys this year, so we'll have to wait and see kind of what roles really are specified in training camp to really get a feel for how things work with this class. But it's definitely a fun group. If you missed that episode, definitely go check it out. I don't know why you would be missing that. I would imagine anybody watching right now has already checked it out, but in case you missed it, please go check that out and let us know what you think.
Yeah, feedback has been great. That was a good one. I agree. We didn't love the idea of trying to give out grades to some of these guys. I feel like we're kind of shifting away from that. I think some people, even in the media, or just fans, are kind of pushing back against this idea. Who am I to look at a 7th round pick and say that's an F, or look at the 5th round tackle to guard convert and be like, oh, that's an A-? What is this? I don't know. Again, if that was a teacher thing for me, because now we're focusing on assessment and criteria and rubrics and all that, but how do I say someone's a C+ and the other person is a C-? I can't do that. So I'm just excited, and I think we're excited to see where the Chargers use these guys and how they're used throughout the season. Yeah, there's probably only 2.5 instant impact guys in terms of big time snaps, but I think each one of these guys, 6 out of the 7 guys will do some things on the field this year.
Yeah, I mean, if the 7th does some things on the field this year, it means that disaster has stricken the Chargers, which no shade to Max Duggan, but, obviously if he's on the field, that means the season has gone very, very poorly. So today we just feel like we wanted to kind of take stock of really where the Chargers are at as a roster. And like we always do, I'm a visual learner. And in case anybody ever doubted that, watch the show more often and you'll figure out that we do a lot of sheets and slideshows and things like that. So we're going to have a Google sheet today, kind of filling in some blanks. So with the way this roster is officially constructed, they have 88 spots that count towards the 90. They signed CJ Okoye from the international pool today, and that does not count for the official roster pool. Apparently he was an offensive lineman who won MVP in the International League, which is pretty freaking cool. But he's going to play defensive tackle for the Chargers. So to be determined there. He's not going to be featured on the show because I don't have international film tape to watch. So we'll have to see what that one works out. But like I said, we're just going to kind of take stock of where the roster is at, fill in where these rookies are going to go, where the undrafted free agents are going to go, and then also highlight some potential post-draft veteran signings tonight.
Sounds good. I'm ready.
All right. As always, please make sure you are subscribed to the channel, like the video, comment, let us know what you think. If you are listening to this, we'll do our best to articulate everything that we are going to be doing today. And then you guys as well, please leave a rating, review whenever you get a chance. So I'm going to pull up the sheet right now, and we're just going to kind of fill some things in. So on the screen, obviously, we're going to do offense and then defense. We have the starters on the left. For our visual audience, if you see a plus sign next to their names, it means they're currently dealing with an injury, which apparently Zion Johnson was as well, according to Kellen Moore. So it hasn't been a ton of buzz there. So we have starters, primary backups, depth pieces, and then draft picks, undrafted free agents, members of the 2022 practice squad like Larry Roundtree, Stone Smart, guys like that. And then as we start filling spaces in, we'll delete those columns, and we'll have players on the roster bubble as well as camp bodies and practice squad players. So I think obviously the natural spot here is to maybe assess, Tyler, which players are potentially in danger of losing a role to one of these draft picks.
Oh, goodness. I guess Jalen Guyton at this point, because they've already, or at least Staley has come out and said that Darius Davis is the wide receiver 5 type for them. So, I don't know if they'll keep 6 receivers. They switched 6 to 6 defensive tackles last year, so they might be able to make that change. And I don't see any smart reason at this point to move on from Jalen Guyton, but Guyton is not 100% healthy. And I don't know, maybe it's an initial roster thing. Maybe that Guyton is not on the roster. Maybe he's placed on IR or something. I don't know. Or his short-term IR, however it works. But I think in terms of roster spot, technically I think the 5th spot on here will go to Darius Davis and not Jalen Guyton, at least for now.
Yeah, I think Guyton is definitely one. I'm very curious to see what they do with Brendan Hymas. He's not necessarily a veteran, but they did draft Jordan McFadden, obviously from Clemson, who you and I both like a lot. I liked Hymas coming out of college, but he just hasn't shown enough consistency just yet. Foster Sorrell kind of maybe seems entrenched into the swing tackle role, at least for now. Although Daniel Popper still believes that Jamari Sawyer is the swing tackle. Either way, I do feel like Brendan Hymas is probably on the outside looking in, but we can kind of fit him in down the road. So in terms of the draft picks as well, Tyler, let's start with Quentin Johnston here. Mm-hmm. Big debate obviously going to be happening throughout training camp this year. We know the Chargers are not necessarily going to hand him a starting spot, but for purposes of the show today, is he the wide receiver starter at Z spot over Josh Palmer, or do you still feel like it is Josh Palmer's job at this current moment?
I think for all of a week, we're going to have Josh Palmer as the starter. People will freak out. Everyone's going to write their articles. Everyone's going to make their videos, and then he'll end up being the starter by week 2. We've seen this, and that was Asante Samuel Jr., who was a 2nd-round pick. Granted, that was over Faison versus Palmer, who they do like. I think Palmer is certainly going to make plays in camp where we're going, geez, maybe he should get some work as not even technically like a 3B, but like a 3C, even though there's no 3B. But I feel like he should at least be in that rotation a bit. But I think Quentin Johnston jumps in front of Josh Palmer here, and he should, given how high they drafted him. But I do think Palmer, it's strange. I've never had someone I liked so much be replaced by a 1st-round pick, and I think they had to do that. Like, typically you're looking at one of these receivers or offensive linemen or whatever, and you think, okay, like, there's nobody else. So of course they have to start with Josh Palmer. It hurts a bit to have to replace him as the wide receiver 3, but they did, and they're going to. So I think he's over Josh Palmer.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like you said, we might see them be a little bit slow to make that transition. Maybe easing the transition for Quentin Johnston, at least at first. But I think you and I both feel that this wide receiver trio probably complements itself better if Quentin is the starting Z. And so, I think that speed on the backside, his ability to create yards after the catch is best utilized as the Z. And I think that's where he'll fit in. So question then becomes, Tyler, where are we putting Josh Palmer's primary role as the backup? I think we'll probably slot Darius Davis in as the backup slot. So do you think Palmer is better suited as an X or better suited as the Z?
I think he'll back up Mike Williams, and I think that's what they're going to want to do anyway. During his rookie season, before Josh Palmer just had to try to be both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams because guys were hurt. They used him a lot. Now, granted, that was with Joe Lombardi, but they used him as that X, and they used him a lot vertically in a way that they don't really use Keenan Allen. I think Keenan Allen is going to stay longer than Mike Williams if I had to pick. So I think they're going to try to make Josh Palmer Mike Williams' replacement. And frankly, I think that role does suit him pretty well.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I like him as Z as well. I think a lot of people have tried to pencil him into the slot role, and he's come out and said that he loves watching Keenan Allen's tape, and he wants to be Keenan Allen's shadow almost essentially. I like Palmer better as an outside receiver, whether that's the X or the Z. I think that kind of he can be have some flexibility there. But I definitely like Palmer better on the outside. All right, so we'll naturally shift in Darius Davis here as the backup slot behind Keenan Allen for now. But this is something we talked about on the Chargers channel, Tyler, is that Darius Davis has some legit receiving chops too. Like he's not just going to be a return specialist. Like I think the Chargers would have confidence in him if he had to play significant snaps at some point down the season.
I don't know. I think he's going to always, even if Keenan gets hurt, I think they would rather insert. I know it's kind of tough because a lot of these guys can do some sort of different things. I still think that'll go to Jalen Guyton before Davis. I don't know how to describe it because I just said that Davis would be wide receiver 5, but I think Davis will be stuck always as a sort of wide receiver 5, and he won't like move up the rankings unless they have to. I think if someone gets hurt, maybe they'll flip over to Guyton before Davis. I don't know how to describe that, but like I think they're going to keep him in a sort of as small of a role as possible. I don't think that role increases unless multiple guys get hurt.
Yeah, that's fair. Again, I'm not expecting Darius Davis to like steal a role or anything like that. But as the wide receiver 5, I think they'll be okay with maybe easing Jalen Guyton back onto the field because Darius Davis does have some legit wide receiver chops. So, all right, should we move to Jordan McFadden here? Where would you like to fit him in on the depth chart?
Gosh, it's so difficult because he can do a number of things. I feel more comfortable with him as the backup right guard, with Foster Sarell being the primary for now swing tackle, the only one that they have. Mm-hmm. Again, they might Frankenstein's monster this thing and move some guys around. But I think McFadden is going to be Hymus's replacement. They let some guys last year, even in the preseason, try to get some run over Hymus. Hymus ended up being the guy, but you saw some players, get a bit more shine at different spots. To try to replace him. They never really ended up doing that, and I understand why they didn't. But Hymus, it just hasn't been all that for them. And then I think he came in against who was it? He gave up like 6 or 4 pressures or whatever.
It was against the Raiders and Jerry Tillery.
Oh, that one. Yeah, that gets you demoted. So I'm going to put Max Duggan ahead of Brendan Hymus. And I think Brendan Hymus is going to be cut as a result of this. I guess I would understand why they would keep him if they feel that McFadden is yes, he'll be a guard, but he's really their backup tackle, because I think Hymus at this point is just a guard for them. But for now, I think McFadden over Hymus is the call.
Yeah, I tend to agree there. There's been some buzz about McFadden being a swing tackle, and I can understand why. That's what he did in college, but I think to me, he best projects as a guard, in my opinion. So again, different kind of strengths and weaknesses than him and Sawyer. I think Sawyer is a much better pass protector. McFadden, at least coming out of college, I should say, McFadden is a better run blocking prospect, in my opinion, at this point. And I love what he does in that regard. So I think he needs some work as a pass protector, which is why I'm more comfortable with him as a guard than as a tackle. But similar to Sawyer, I think if push comes to shove, emergency strikes, I think they would feel at least confident in putting him as a tackle in a pinch, not necessarily long term. But Sawyer is bigger, longer, so I think there's definitely some differences there. So I think McFadden is your swing guard for now. And like you, I do think that Hymus is on the chopping block because of it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Hymus was last year, and that was in favor of Ryan Hunter or something. Now you actually have a draft pick you invested in and feel pretty good about, and we feel really good about. So I think Hymus, I think he's on his way out.
Yeah, I mean it's unfortunate. I was higher on Hymus than most. I think Brandon Thorne was a big Brendan Hymus guy as well. Some transitions to the inside just don't work out supposedly. So obviously Max Duggan, that's the easy one here to place. Any thought from you, Tyler, that Max Duggan can push Easton Stick for QB2 though?
Oh gosh, I think if Stick were on the final year of his original deal, then sure. And I actually think that maybe if that were the case, they might carry 2. But they gave Easton Stick a good chunk of money to come back. So I think that Easton Stick is quarterback 2. And God bless Justin Herbert and keep him healthy.
Yeah, I mean they're paying Easton Stick a nice little chunk of change. You know, it's not necessarily like a high end backup money, but they're paying him more than they paid Chase Daniel last year, and you know they've been very complimentary of him with everything that they've said in the offseason because of his play, because of his high IQ and intangibles. And you know, I think Max Duggan has a lot of intangibles as well. I think he is probably a better runner of the football, but I think Duggan has a ways to go in terms of processing and accuracy that I would be pretty uncomfortable with Max Duggan taking snaps over Easton Stick as much as I would prefer maybe more of an established backup veteran. But Duggan pretty firmly QB3 for me. I'm curious if there's any chance that they maybe cut him and try and stash him on the practice squad. I think there's a very, 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 very little chance that happens. Tom Telesco has kept 3 quarterbacks for the majority of his tenure. But if things are kind of dicey at another spot, you know, obviously there's some guys who are coming off some injuries. Maybe that QB3 spot doesn't become so important as Telesco might think.
Yeah, I just don't buy it. Like you said, it was a small chance. I think it's a negative. I don't know. What's the lowest I can go? 0, I guess.
Yeah.
With the way Herbert has already been hurt and the fact that he's not even going to be healthy for a while or officially fully healthy. Yeah, I just think 3 quarterbacks is the year to like of all the years to keep 3 quarterbacks. I think this is the one they're going to definitely do it because at least there's a built-in excuse for this one.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, Tyler, any of the undrafted free agents or any of the 2022 practice squad members maybe jump out to you as somebody you think could legitimately make a push for the roster? I know we haven't dived completely into the undrafted free agent pool. I know you've watched a couple guys, I think more of the defensive players. You've watched Pokey Williams. I have not watched Pokey Williams. But any of that group or any of the practice squad group from last year maybe stand out as somebody who could make a push to be on the roster.
So for also including last year's practice squad, then I would look at, I mean, they mentioned Stone Smart as the 4th guy pretty routinely, and he keeps getting brought up. You could very easily just not mention him, but he keeps getting brought up. I would prefer someone like Hunter Camp Moyer because of the blocking ability. I don't think Stone Smart is that guy for them, but I think they might keep 4 tight ends. We'll have to see sort of at the end here what the numbers look like. If I had watched Michael, is it Ezekiel?
I honestly couldn't tell you.
Okay, well,
maybe Ezekiel. I don't know.
Sure.
If anybody in the chat knows how to pronounce the UCLA tight end's last name, let us know.
I think there's a shot there. I think, you know, of the tight ends, if they don't add anybody, and it kind of sounds like they are looking for one. I don't know if they will. Then I think that they're going to add someone who can block. So if that's him, great. If that's Camp Moyer, great. But I think there's a spot on this team for a blocking tight end 4, which they didn't do last year. But I don't know how they really feel about Parham and McKitty.
Yeah, I think unless they sign a veteran blocker, that we're probably looking at 3, because I know that there's a good amount of people who still think that the Chargers are only going to keep 5 wide receivers. I think that there's enough trust with Jalen Guyton and Justin Herbert that he's going to make the roster if he's healthy. He might be on the PUP list or something like that, but if we get to training camp and Jalen Guyton is running around and making plays, like I think he's going to make it. So I think tight end becomes that spot where we go back to keeping 3 tight ends. And if they don't sign a veteran, I think it's going to be Everett Parham and Trey McKitty.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As for the rest of the undrafted free agents, I haven't watched them. I'm not caught up on my Delta State tape. I've tried to reach out and try to get some sort of ideas of who he is, but I don't really have access to that tape. So I'll have to watch a 3.5 hour YouTube stream. I'm sure it's awful to try to figure out what he can do. But I mean, there's a chance, right? Because if they actually want a true tackle to be their swing tackle, other than Cyril, Millsap's OT 4 right now. Like he is right now when they go to camp. Again, depending on how they move guys, Slater Pipkin start, Cyril's OT 3, and I don't think there's a whole lot of trust in that.
Yeah,
and then Nick Millsap, he's the offensive tackle 4 right now, like right away. So, and I think he has a good shot. I couldn't tell you anything about him.
Yeah, I mean, we asked Tom Telesco about him, so Tom will tell you a little bit about him on Tuesday, but we have not watched him. The running backs, I'm curious there if there's any chance for either of those guys, but it's a similar conversation as last year, right? Like I think if they keep a fourth, it's going to be Roundtree because of his special teams ability. Mm-hmm. And we, depending on how training camp goes, we might be looking at him being active on the roster on game days with Isaiah Spiller as a healthy scratch again.
Yep.
Because of that special teams ability. So the chances of Tyler Hoosman and Elijah Dotson providing more special teams value than Larry Roundtree, I think is pretty slim. I think Larry Roundtree is a guy that Kevin or Ryan Ficken, excuse me. I was looking at the chat and read Kevin Kernick. Ryan Ficken, I think, likes Larry Roundtree's ability as a blocker on special teams. So I do think there's a chance at least that Larry Roundtree makes the roster.
Yeah, I don't think we'll get a repeat of last year where he's active over Isaiah Spiller. I really hope we don't, but I also don't think we will. But Roundtree as an active guy, as a special teamer, they might decide to, we'll talk about defense in a bit, maybe let one of the linebackers go, whether it's Amen, whether it's Nick Neiman, probably Amen. And in that regard, you can let one of the linebackers go, maybe keep Larry Roundtree instead as the fourth running back. Two positions that aren't very high priority, running back and linebacker. But I think that Larry Roundtree is someone they would love to use on special teams. So I could see it. But again, as far as the running backs go, haven't watched them. I know the numbers that Arjun shared in terms of, the translatable stats to the NFL weren't great, but we'll see when they go to training camp. Although last year with the two guys they had, I right now could not tell you who those two running backs were, and they never ever received any touches during camp. They were just watching from the sidelines the entire time. Granted, I think there was a bit more of a running back battle then, trying to figure out Joshua Kelly, trying to figure out Larry Roundtree, trying to figure out Isaiah Spiller. So I get that, but I mean, those guys did not even touch the football in training camp, let alone even like a preseason game. So if they make it, they're going to have some a couple of outstanding plays because they're not getting many touches this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, there was even after Isaiah Spiller got injured, it was still those guys cannot get touches. I forget, one of them was from Buffalo, who I liked a decent amount. So we'll see what happens once I dive in here. Okay, so I do, before we move on to the defensive side of things, I'm gonna say I feel like there's a decent chance to me that Zach Bailey makes the roster too. They claimed him off of waivers last year. They kept him around at the end of the season this year. They didn't prefer him over Foster Sorrell, which I thought was interesting from the jump. But there's at least a decent amount of interest in Zach Bailey, and whether that's keeping him as a practice squad guy, whether that's him pushing like a Ryan Hunter for the final roster spot, will remain to be seen. But I think there's an outside chance that Zach Bailey is somebody who makes a roster push.
What was his role last year in the preseason? Was he their tackle?
He was their left tackle in the preseason games, if I'm not mistaken. And then there was he kind of learned how to play guard a little bit throughout the season. He was, when everything kind of got dicey at the end, he was like their swing guard. But he is somebody that, as Ed Mieses is pointing out, Saley's mentioned him a couple of times in the pressers. Again, they kept him after the season. They claimed him off of waivers last year. I think there's at least a decent chance he makes a roster push.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that over, okay, maybe Larry Roundtree is a special teamer, but I mean, there's a legit. I mean, anyone looking at this offensive tackle depth, you can't feel good. So I'm happy if it's Bailey, if it's Millsap, any of these guys that are tackles. I'd love for them to make it and earn it.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. That is a spot I'm sure we'll get to some
Yeah.
names, but I do think that they could really use a veteran swing tackle in there. Just one more veteran body besides Will Clapp in the second unit.
Yep.
All right, we'll move to defense here. Obviously, starting lineup for the most part was pretty set in stone. Heading into the draft, there's not as many draft depth pieces available either, at least in my opinion. So we'll talk about some names here. Maybe the biggest question mark that we have from a defensive side of things leaving the draft was what is the cornerback rotation going to look like? And maybe the biggest stock up after the draft is Jasir Taylor, who is projected currently to be the starter in the slot. Tyler, how concerned are you about the cornerback depth right now, given that they didn't draft any of the corners that we kind of thought they maybe could have?
I think that really hinges more on the JC Jackson question than anything else, because if JC's healthy and Michael Davis is their best corner, his spot is safe. And I think if JC's healthy, he's out there. So I think in some ways, I feel much better about Asante Samuel Jr. playing the slot than I do like McFadden moving to tackle in the middle of the season. So I actually feel okay about the depth overall, but I just do not know how to answer the JC Jackson question, because Tom Telesco thinks that they're going to have him for, camp. Now, I don't know if that means fully in camp. But the fact that they're even considering that is wild to me. So, if I think they might be trying to play their cards right in a certain way and, keep this as their main group, I think you're going to have Keemon Hall, maybe elevated from the practice squad for 2 games or something, or whatever it ends up being. And I think once JC Jackson's healthy, I think this is your depth. If John Taylor goes down, I think ASJ is your slot. Maybe they change a couple things. Maybe they find a role for, one of the safeties like a Raheem Leonard or Mark Webb or something. But I'm okay with the depth overall. I think it's a good group of corners. I just don't know about JC Jackson's health.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. And to clarify there with JC Jackson, we didn't ask him that. He said that in one of the press conferences about JC Jackson being hopeful that they're being hopeful that he can play in training camp. So we'll see what happens with the actual rotation here. If JC Jackson is healthy, Tyler, are we on the same page that Asante might be the get the short end of the stick in the rotation?
Yeah, I think that JC Jackson's, that's the guy that they paid a ton of money to. It's been so tough because it made a lot of this would be a lot more easy to project, I guess, if Asante Samuel Jr. didn't have that final game against the Jaguars where it was like the best thing I've ever seen. So how do you take that off the field? But you're paying one corner a lot of money, and Michael Davis is your best corner. So yeah, I think Asante Samuel Jr., just in terms of outside guys, he's the odd man out if JC is healthy.
Yeah. I think they'll still find a role for him. I think he's too talented to be completely on the bench. You know what I mean? But I think they value Jaw's size a little bit more in the slot, and especially as a run defender. Obviously, Bryce Callahan is still out there. Maybe that's an addition that they could revisit here. But I have a hard time kind of finding a true starting spot for Asante if JC Jackson is healthy. So, I just think that he will be your 4th defensive back, and the Chargers are going to kind of pivot away from having like 3 corners and 3 safeties to 4 corners. And, maybe Jasir Taylor can kind of play some quote unquote safety role for them.
Yeah.
And you just have this cornerback group that you feel really good about in terms of the depth. And guys will kind of just move around the spot. So I'm very curious to see how that one pans out. But I do think if JC is healthy, he is the starter opposite of Michael Davis.
Yeah, they have too many questions to answer with JC Jackson because they have to cut him next year if he's no good, or keep him for the next few years, because if he, let's say, comes back second half of the year and he's outstanding, that's your corner. You're not cutting him. You're not moving on from him. But if he's terrible, then But they do have to find out. They have to find out. And they're not going to find that out at training camp, because who was one of the best players at training camp? That was JC Jackson. He was outstanding. Then the surgery happened. You just don't know. So I think that for better or worse, I know fans are like, oh, I think Asante Samuel Jr. is better. I get that. I totally do. No one had a game, or certainly at least JC Jackson didn't have like a game like Asante Samuel Jr. had last year, but I think they're going to want to find out. And there's just too much investment, and they believed in him way too much. They went out of their way to make a very expensive signing on a premium player with maybe one question mark or two if you consider the, moving away from New England curse sort of thing. And I think they're going to want to find out. So I think, I like it or not, like I would love Asante Samuel Jr. to be out there. I think he's the odd man out. And in the slot, I think people obviously are talking about him starting over Jaw Taylor, but we saw last year how they felt about Asante Samuel Jr. and they already were, with a rookie with Jaw Taylor, moving Asante Samuel Jr. out of that starting group. So yeah, it's a strange thing to say because I love Asante Samuel Jr. so much, and we all know he's super talented. And yet, even with just a 6th round pick from last year in the slot, it's almost like there's no role for him based on how they see him.
Yeah, and like I said, I think he'll play a lot. I think they'll still find a spot for him, find a role for him, assuming JC Jackson is healthy. So this might not be a thing. Maybe JC is not fully healthy. Maybe he's not ready for training camp, and maybe Asante is the guy from the jump. So, question from the chat here from Ed Miesis. If JC does come back, but it's just like not going super well, I think this is obviously a variable that we have to consider of how patient the Chargers are going to be with his recovery, because obviously he had the foot thing and then he has the knee injury coming back. So how patient do you think the Chargers can afford to be if JC is just kind of not getting up to speed in training camp?
It's tough. I think they would, let's say he's actually healthy in training camp and is actually playing, because it's easy to just say, well, he really even shouldn't be out there. So the fact that he is a miracle. I think they're going to get him out there week 1, let him do his, if he's healthy, and let it rock. I mean, they had Asante Samuel Jr. as a starter last year over Michael Davis. Michael Davis was a gunner for a long time. But Michael Davis ended up finishing the second half of training camp in the preseason a lot better than Asante Samuel Jr. And Asante Samuel Jr. did struggle a bit more in that second half. You saw a defensive holding penalty or pass interference or whatever it was in the preseason. Didn't look as crisp or as good as Michael Davis to end training camp. And then they went, okay, cool. Well, Asante Samuel Jr., you're going to start anyway over Michael Davis. And, which I totally understand. I just don't think training camp is going to matter as much to them. They're going to want to see it on the field.
Yeah, I agree. He has to earn it, right? I don't think the Chargers are going to hand JC the role, and maybe they do end up being patient with him because they have that depth behind him. But they're going to give him the opportunity because they put that investment in him. And respectfully, Michael Davis is the best cornerback on the team. Like,
and they feel that way.
Doubt that. They feel that way. The numbers say that. The tape says that. And we feel that way pretty strongly as well. All right, we'll get to the draft picks here. Tuli obviously pretty easily fits in as the edge 2 behind Joey Bosa. I've been pretty high on the pick here after the Chargers selected him. Obviously, Miles Murphy was the guy I really liked. I think Tuli can play that same kind of role. Do you think, Tyler, that the drafting of Tuli Tuipulotu completely rules out a re-signing of Kyle Van Noy? Because that's kind of the big question on social media right now is does Tuli out, does that mean that they're not going to sign maybe another edge rusher or anything like that?
Yeah, that was the one I've been tossing and turning with. And today, because we're going to talk about some veterans, I was like, do they bring back Kyle Van Noy? Is there a spot?
Yeah.
They would have to change up what they did last year in terms of how many guys they keep. But I think that with Tuli, like if he were Isaiah Foskey or something, or even, it wouldn't be this guy, but like Zach Harrison, then I think that they would go ahead and get Kyle Van Noy. But I think Tuli, granted, I think Tuli's mostly an edge rusher for them. I think he can do enough things where, no, he's not Kyle Van Noy because they're very different players and skill sets. But I think that Tuli can do enough different things. And I even think Chris Rumpf can do that where you don't bring him back. And I think the other person that really can do some of the Kyle Van Noy things is Deion Henley. And I think that whether it's as a rusher, not like an edge rusher necessarily, but as an extra blitzer, as someone who can move around at different spots, who can cover, I think that's something that Henley could potentially end up doing as well. So by some sort of, amalgamation of all these different players and their skill sets, I don't think Kyle Van Noy is back, but I would love it if they did. Like, we would love to see more depth, right? I think the 4 edge rushers they have, I think that's fine. Love the starters. Really like Tuli, but I haven't seen a whole lot from Chris Rumph, though I do think he's just going to take one more smaller step in year 3. But I don't see why they couldn't bring back Kyle Van Noy. I just don't think they're going to do it at this point.
Yeah, I think if an injury strikes, I think you can definitely bring Kyle Van Noy back. But
Totally.
we know the Chargers over the last 2 years have basically allocated 10 spots on the defensive line, and in the first year, I want to say it was 5 and 5 in terms of edge rushers versus defensive linemen. Last year it was 4 edge rushers, 6 defensive tackles. So there's not a lot of flexibility here. So the biggest question mark in terms of the defensive line is probably like, what is the health status of Austin Johnson and Otito Ogbonia? From social media, it seems like Austin Johnson is further along than Otito. Austin Johnson has posted videos on his Instagram, running and doing some cutting and things like that, wherever he's been training. Otito is just barely starting to run in like the anti-gravity treadmill situation. So it does seem like Austin Johnson could be fine, but I'm maybe a little bit more concerned about Otito's recovery.
Yeah, as am I. And Otito was hurt after Austin Johnson, right? In terms of the timeline,
it was a week after. It was a week after, yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, definitely worried there, and I think that's where some of these undrafted free agents can definitely, or practice squad guys could fill in.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess we can kind of just adjacently talk about Scott Matlock. Excuse me, man, I'm just messing up his name on both shows this week. I apologize, Scott Matlock. How do you see him fitting in with this group? I kind of have it on here distinguished as a nose tackle, a 3 tech, and a 5 tech. For our audio audience, the 5 tech is Morgan Fox, the 3 tech is Austin Johnson, and the nose is Sebastian Joseph Day. Otito is Sebastian's backup, and right now I have Chris Hinton penciled in as the backup for Austin Johnson. But where do you see Scott fitting in here on the depth chart?
It's interesting because I think he does so many different things well, but I think Matlock is your Morgan Fox backup sort of guy. I think he can play with some power on the inside. I think there's definitely a role for him to be able to move in closer to where the center is, but I think he's going to be backing up Morgan Fox, and I think I feel pretty good about that. So Hinton would be the 6th guy here. Why am I not thinking? So Christian Covington is not officially on the roster. He's not signed. He's just still working out, or is that over now?
I think that's over now. I haven't seen him at the facility recently. I think now that it's actually like OTAs, there's some technicalities that maybe he can't be at the facility. I don't know. That's an interesting spot, though. If they bring him back, I feel like he'd probably feel a lot better about not having Austin Johnson or Otito to start the season.
Yeah, I could see them doing the sort of practice squad shuffle like they did last year, where bringing Covington as a body, he's going to be on the practice squad, which they had him to start the season for all of 2 seconds. So yeah, maybe, but I think this 6 is your 6. I don't recall exactly what David Moa's role was, but I think they just believe in Chris Hinton a lot more as that 6th guy. So yeah, this 6 seems to be the right 6.
Yeah, Moa is probably more exclusively like a nose and a 1 tech. Chris Hinton, I think, showed some really fun flashes last year as a 3 tech, somebody that could, maybe even kick out to the 5 tech and rush the passer. Maybe I'm a little too like rich on that, but I have heard good things from within the building that they really like him as well. The tape was interesting, at least. I do feel like Chris Hinton could be a nice gem for them, but I wouldn't hate like putting him into the depth piece category here. And maybe we can talk about like a Gerard Clark challenging for that spot, David Moa as well. But I think Chris Hinton probably is the favorite right now to be that 6th spot.
Yeah, and I think just based on everything and what we've seen, and heck, even the relationship with Coach Ed, I think he's the favorite of the 6. I think he's obviously the least likely, I guess, to make it of the 6. 4 being obvious, and the Matlock being the draft pick. So, but still, I do think they keep 6. That is Hinton. Yeah.
Okay. So should I leave him or move him to the depth piece spot?
Um, I mean, depth sheet piece still makes the roster, obviously. So,
Yeah.
leave him. Let's give him a bonus, a primary backup spot.
All right. Sounds good. Okay, so next piece here is Mr. Dayon Henley. If you missed my Washington State interview with Jamie Vinnick, who covers the Washington State Cougars, please go check that out. That's on the channel now. Some great information about Dayon and his ability as a player, as well as his role on special teams. I don't know if you heard this, Tyler, but Dayon returned kicks as a freshman at Nevada. And he obviously was their gunner recently, on Washington State's punt team. So I think Ryan Ficken's going to have a lot of fun with Dayon, but how do you see him fitting into the defensive depth chart here?
Yeah, I think fans are really going to want us to say the thing, which is that he's over Kenneth Murray, but I just don't think he is at this point. I think they're, aside from cutting him like they did with Jerry Tillery, I think they're going to see that transition at some point where he is the guy over Murray. At this point, they've already shown that they're not committed to Murray long term. I think they do like Murray more than they do Tillery, or at least more than they did at this point last year. So there is a difference there, and they seem very actually like with Jerry Tillery. It was, well, we know who the good players are, and we know who needs to still earn their spot, right? And then ended up being Tillery was, and Tillery was in the needs to earn your spot in the NFL, sort of spot last year. Whereas Kenneth Murray, they do think he's doing excellent things. They do see him as that starter, but I don't know, man. I think look, I'm happy to see a huge difference. I'm happy to see him playing more like Eric Kendricks and having that role, and he's learned so much. And listen, we just saw Trey Pipkins do it after being a not very good tackle. Suddenly he was a very good tackle. So it is possible, especially with someone like Henley pushing you. Because this is probably the first time. No, I wouldn't say that. But Henley is going to be pushing Murray, and at least Murray knows, this is it. So I think there's a shot that Murray holds on to this, but I think Henley's the backup for now. Telesco came out after the draft and said he's going to be depth and special teams because we like what Kenneth Murray does. But I think we're going to start seeing something where suddenly he's there over Kenneth Murray. I just think it's going to be time. At some point, it's going to be time. There's no reason for them to keep Murray out there to see what he can do. If he's not showing you anything or any improvement, give him a few games. If it's not working, at some point they'll go to Henley.
Yeah, I think of the defensive rookies, I would say Dayon's probably the favorite to start at some point if people in front of him are healthy. Obviously, if Joey or Khalil goes down, Tuli's going to be starting. But I think that people should be excited about Dayon 100%. I love his fit in this defense. I love the flexibility from a pass coverage and pass rushing standpoint that he can give you as a third down weapon. But I think that they're going to be patient with him because they do like Kenneth Murray, at least a little bit, at least on run defense situations, because he's a bigger, more physical player. Unequivocally, I think you can feel comfortable about his ability to be a little bit more physical than Dayon at this point. Kenneth Murray's like 30 pounds heavier right now, and he's like 3 or 4 inches taller. So people should definitely be excited about Dayon, and I would not be shocked if he started at some point down the road. But for now, I think we do have to look at Kenneth Murray as the starter. Obviously, Eric Kendricks alongside him, who's going to be a great mentor for both of those players. So we'll move Nick Niemann down to the depth role here, and we'll move Dayon into the primary backup role there. So Tyler, do you think there's any chance that Eamon Ogbongbemiga or Nick Niemann are maybe on the outside looking in, or do you think both of them are kind of safe because of their special teams ability?
I think Ficken's say has more say than most guys. So I think that, I think Eamon and Nick do both make it. If Troy Reeder wasn't on the team last year, right, and maybe, Eamon made it, Nick made it, but there was no Troy Reeder, then sure, I could see one of them being cut. But Reeder made it, and Eamon made it, and Nick made it, which is a bit of a surprise, but that's Ryan Ficken. And in year 2, now that he's proven, what he is as a coach and what he can do on special teams, I think they're going to keep all 3 of these backup linebackers.
Yeah, I agree. Eamon and Nick Niemann were fantastic special teams players. I think Dayon is going to fill right in there as well and be a key special teams player too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's get to the safety room spot here. Obviously, this is kind of the other spot that a lot of people are kind of circling for a veteran free agent pickup. Currently speaking, obviously, Derwin James is going to be the starting strong safety. I feel like, and I'm pretty sure you agree, that Alohi should be considered the favorite right now to start alongside Derwin James. And we'll see what happens if there's a veteran free agent pickup here. But what do you make of the safety depth behind Derwin James at this current moment, Tyler?
What do I make of it? It sucks, but like this is not very good depth. Not that it's unproven. At best, it's unproven, and we don't know a thing about it, honestly. If you're considering the depth behind him, not Alohi Gilman, because Gilman's a starter alongside him. Raheem Lane, great on special teams. I could definitely see him making the team because Ficken had him over JT Woods on special teams. But I mean, Raheem Lane, JT Woods, and Mark Webb was all hurt all of last training camp and couldn't even crack the roster in the end.
Yeah.
Like, this is not great depth behind Derwin James. And I don't expect anyone to come out and be Derwin James, but they need something else here. They have to have something else here. Tackle for me is still a bigger need and priority in terms of depth, but like this isn't great either. So I think Raheem Lane can do some awesome things at some point. I hope JT Woods does some awesome things at some point, but we don't know that. We haven't seen that. So I think they need to get another body in here. And I'm surprised, honestly, John Johnson isn't already on the team, but I think that's, although I've been saying this for a month now, I think it's on the way.
Yeah, that certainly makes a lot of sense. I think John Johnson's former teammate Ronnie Harrison would make some sense. I have a hard time picturing this being the safety group heading into training camp. I think that Alohi Gilman as your safety 3, you feel good about. I think that he's a solid rotational piece. I think definitely earned those snaps over Nasir Adderley at the end of last season. But like you're an injury away from Raheem Lane being safety 3 and JT Woods being like a full-time starter. And we just haven't seen enough at this point to, officially say this. So I think in an ideal world, like they do bring in another safety piece. And I know I said this the other day, I know everybody wants Bryce Callahan back, but I would much rather have another safety in this room. I think I'm at least comfortable with the cornerback depth. I'm very uncomfortable with the safety depth right now.
Yeah, if I had to pick, I would love another safety in here because you can at least move Asante Samuel Jr. to the slot. Or heck, if everyone's, fine and only Jaw Taylor gets hurt, you can just move him and you feel great about that. With this, I just don't feel good about this. And Derwin James is someone who there's going to be a game in there somewhere. There might be a couple of games in there somewhere, and this cannot be the backup plan.
Yeah, 100%. So we'll see. To me, tight end and safety are like the two spots where I'm like, okay, let's go get a veteran here, offensive tackle as well, more so than cornerback. I love Bryce Callahan was fantastic for the Chargers at the end, all season long, pretty much. Just a real steadying presence there. But I'm comfortable with Jaw and Asante and whatever kind of other mix you can do in the slot. But this team needs another safety, reliable safety, in my opinion.
Yep.
So I think in an ideal world, you move over Raheem Lane over to the depth piece spot. Alohi becomes a primary backup instead, and you can feel a little bit more comfortable that way. Tyler, I think one of the more popular undrafted free agents signings, whether it be by Chargers fans or by media members, Gerard Clark had a real chance of getting drafted by a lot of people. He was graded as the highest remaining undrafted free agent by several sites as well. What do you think his chances are of making the roster? I don't know if you've officially watched him yet, but he's a big, beefy nose tackle. There's some uncertainty in front of him. So what do you make of the chances there for Gerard Clark or anybody else on this list that you have watched?
Yeah, that's good to know. If he's more of the big, beefy nose tackle type, then I think that would put him over the guy that I have watched, which is Terrence Lang. Not that Lang isn't an interior guy. He did a lot of stuff, but he's more of like an edge guy who can also do some interior stuff. Not like Tuli, but more of like a DN sort of type than Tuli is. So if that's what Gerard Clark is, I mean, then I could see it because Otito is going to be, or at least was last year, their sort of backup to Sebastian Joseph Day. as that nose type, which I didn't expect. So if that's what Gerard Clark can bring, and he's a kind of a pure interior guy, then yeah, I could see that being one of the guys that they bring in and to make the roster, especially if Atito's not healthy. If Atito's not healthy, then and Gerard Clark, that is his role, then yeah, I could see him making the team.
Yeah, I think they're of the undrafted free agents, I think he's probably the best player. At least from a talent perspective. I have not watched all of these guys. I mean, you watched Andrew Farmer today, so you can comment on him if you'd like. But to me, I think outside of Gerard Clark from a defensive perspective, I think the best chance of making the roster might be Taiwan Mullen, the slot corner from Indiana, because him and Keemon Hall, I think like there is a role on the roster for one of those two players, unless they sign another corner or a safety, because like they're going to keep 10 defensive backs. They've done that each of the last 2 years. Right now, we only have 9 penciled in. So whether it's Keemon Hall or Taiwan Mullen or a veteran free agent who comes in, like there's going to be 10 on DBs on the roster, and Taiwan Mullen, Keemon Hall fill a role as a backup slot. They fill a role on special teams. So that Taiwan Mullen is definitely somebody that I have penciled in to watch in the near future and keep an eye on as camp progresses.
Yeah, 18 undrafted free agents, guys. So hang in there with us. We could say who the guys are best shot to make the roster, but I'd love to watch all of them as much as I can. I found some late in college film, watched some Andrew Farmer. I actually think there's a lot of upside to him. I just don't know there's an actual spot for him. It's kind of different. Like I don't think he makes the roster, but it's more because of the spot, not the talent. The player on the practice squad from last year, I guess 2 of them, both Carlo Camp and Ty Shelby, but I think it's notable that Ty Shelby got hurt and then they maintained contact with him and then brought him. They still brought him back, even though he was hurt. Like they wanted to make sure they brought him back, even though he was hurt. Like that could have been it. His undrafted free agent journey, his whole NFL journey, that could have been it. But they kept keeping in contact with him and they brought him back on a deal. Do I think it's, do I think he's edge 2 on this team? No, of course not. But I think it is notable they wanted him back that bad that they did bring him back, because it's I feel like it's rare you see that happen with the Chargers.
JT Woods is not listed as a corner on the Chargers website, right?
I can find out. Chargers, is it Chargers website or Chargers depth chart, or does anybody know?
I would go to like the roster.
Yeah.
Like general roster.
Okay. Los Angeles Chargers depth chart. Honestly, he won't be. He's a safety. JT Woods, right?
Yeah.
No, he's JT. He's a safety.
Yeah, I'm confused by that comment in the chat, but JT Wood's very clearly a safety.
Yeah, he won't be a. Not that they won't do something, with an emergency, of course, sure, at some point.
Yeah.
But JT Woods was a corner for all of 2 plays against the Rams because they were letting so many other guys sit. Raheem Lane was out there as the safety, so they just needed somebody as the Rams ran out the clock twice, and JT Woods played corner for 2 snaps, and then suddenly there's kind of a conspiracy theory or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no worries at all from NFL in the chat. I was confused. Maybe I was thinking I was missing something on their website or anything like that. Okay, so obviously very early in the process, as we are still several months away from the start of the season. But like I said earlier, we wanted to take stock of where the roster was really at. So Tyler, let's wrap up the show today. Obviously, we talked about Kyle Van Noy, we talked about Bryce Callahan. Who are some names in terms of veteran free agents that you would like to see maybe come fill in some gaps on the Chargers roster with the final 2 spots that they have?
Yeah, like a bit more could be Cameron Irving, but a player that maybe could make it happen is Jordan Mills, formerly the right tackle for the Saints. He was on the Bears. He was drafted by the Bears when Nugent was the offensive quality control coach. Then he was on the Cowboys with Kellen Moore. Then he he played with Kellen Moore. And then he was on the Cowboys when Kellen Moore was the offensive coordinator for, I think, all of barely a part of a season. Then he was on the Saints with Will Clapp and Nugent. So I'm actually surprised that's not someone who's already on the roster. That feels like you check every box at that point.
Yeah.
Other than, he's not an elite tackle by any means, but, played 200 snaps in 2021 for the Saints. Obviously has ties to both, Nugent and to Kellen Moore. So I think that's someone they could bring on. He did play right tackle. I think he's mostly been a right tackle his career. Someone like Cam Irving, he's played a lot more snaps at a lot more different spots. but I think they might be looking for like a tackle specific guy. And if Jamari is, I don't know, let's say your backup left tackle or something random like that, then I think bringing on someone like Mills to be your backup right tackle. I don't know how they're doing this, man. But that's at least someone to consider. You know who he is. You've worked with him for like 5 different calendar years. Might as well.
Yeah, Cameron Irving is it Cameron? I don't know. No. Cam Irving's interesting because he's I think he came into the league as a center for the Browns, if I'm not mistaken. So lots of flexibility there for him to potentially fill in some spots. Maybe he's a little older than the Chargers would like. Cam Fleming, same kind of conversation, although he's very clearly a tackle. He played for the Cowboys in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, while Kellen Moore was obviously there. He's been in Denver the last few years, so there's, I'm sure, some familiarity just from a connection standpoint. He had some really good moments last year as a starting left tackle for the Broncos. So if they're maybe interested in getting like a true swing tackle, he's somebody I wouldn't mind as well. From a tight end perspective, there's a couple that have connections to the Chargers. Jeff Swaim, excuse me. He played in Dallas when Kellen was the quarterback, the backup quarterback, as well as the quarterback's coach and offensive coordinator. He's a true inline wide tight end blocking type of tight end. I want to see he was like top 10 in run blocking grade this past year for the Tennessee Titans. So he's somebody who remains unsigned. There was a little bit of buzz that he would stay in Tennessee, but he's still on the market. So that's somebody I'm interested in. I talked about him last season. That's Nick Van Nett, the tight end formerly of the Saints and Broncos. Familiar with Brendan Nugent, familiar with Brandon Staley. So he's somebody that just like a reliable tight end for, I think it is something this team could need. Maybe push McKitty a little bit. So those two are some names to keep in mind at tight end.
Yeah, good call. I wasn't looking that far back to find tight ends. I was looking at like, okay, there's a couple of players whose names I completely forgot at tight end, but it's like, okay, they didn't play more than 1 snap last year. Would that be actually someone that they would bring on to actually push these tight ends? No. So someone like Swaim, that's a great call.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we talked about the guys that are familiar with in terms of Kyle Van Noy, Bryce Callahan. Kind of seems like those ships have sailed. But we'll see if anything changes there. Anybody else you want to bring up, Tyler?
Nope. That's all I got.
Yeah, we spent a lot.
You know what was crazy for me is that I started to look at the receiver list and I realized they drafted 2 of them. We don't have to go find somebody. Like, yeah, no one's asking in the chat about wide receiver. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we talked about Ronnie. We talked about John Johnson, Ronnie Harrison. John Johnson tweeted something cryptic this week. I'm really hoping to get some clarity there. I'm like, just sign somewhere, my guy. Like I just want this whole thing to end. But yeah, I do think that safeties should be a priority for them right now.
Yeah. So the timeline last time after the draft was like, I think May 3rd or 4th for the first guy that they signed, which I believe was it Morgan Fox or was it Bryce Callahan? One of those guys.
Fox was later. It was Kyle Van Noy and Callahan signed like the same day. Yeah, I want to say it was like Friday after the draft.
Yeah. So tomorrow, guys, it's gonna happen tomorrow. It's gonna be great.
Breaking news.
Yeah, no, I'm not breaking any news. If it happens, yes, I broke the news. If it didn't happen, I'm just joking.
Definitely. It should be fun though. I think we'll see them fill those spots at some point.
Yeah.
They'll use the 90. So, all right, Tyler. It's been a great episode, man. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. We will be going live on Sunday evening for just a regular Q&A, just to check in with you guys. We'll see who's going to be able to still tune in and ask some questions. Don't have anything major planned. So it's going to be a little bit more of a hangout, nice chat that day. And then we'll have our usual episode on the Chargers channel on Tuesday for you guys as well. So make sure, and like I said, subscribe to both channels. Make sure to turn those notifications on. Like the video. Let us know what you think about some of the depth chart solutions that we talked about tonight. And hopefully you guys enjoyed it. So that's going to do it for us tonight. We will see you guys on Sunday. Talk to you later.